I'm back with Tim Morrill. We're still in New Jersey. We got a lot of work done today. We made a couple of videos that you guys should definitely check out later. But for now, we're back for part 2 of You've Got the Q's, We've Got the A's. So let's get right to it. Our next question is from Dwight Harris. He's a D-line handler for District 5. He says he also dabbles in the O-line and in cutting. So he wants to know a few things about training in the off-season. So, given that everyone dreams about coming back from the off-season, able to jump higher, run faster, and throw further, what type of expectations are realistic from a dedicated winter and spring of training? How much can a player reasonably expect to increase their vertical?
I think it depends on training age. You know, some athletes, their first year of training, like for example, I was working with Kibo and Rook, 2 players down in Florida, and these were good athletes, but they were the 2 most inexperienced athletes I've ever worked with. And we did pre-testing and post-testing with vertical jump. 6 inches, both of them. I'm like, some can't 6 inches, but I mean that was a real accurate number because that was their first training cycle. But Dwight, I mean, he plays for
District 5.
District 5. You know, a D5 player. Most of those guys are pretty deep into training, so this might be his 5th training year, so that's going to be a completely different take. But I think, you know, I would encourage Dwight to not get too caught up on the numbers. You know, there's a lot of good things that happen, even if your vertical doesn't quantitatively, you know, go up 2 inches. You know, it's a lot of good things will happen. And you know, are we talking about traditional vertical, or are we talking about single leg vertical? You know, if we're talking about single leg verticals and his left leg goes up 4 inches, you know, and that was his non-dominant leg, then that's great. Even if he got an inch on that, just like being able to kind of create symmetry and doing different things. You know, a drop jump is a completely different stimulus than a traditional just static vertical. So definitely a lot of factors going in there, but I think, you know, if he's doing it right, he should, his performance will increase, and that's all that matters.
Right, so even if like a standing 2-leg vertical, which is how we traditionally measure that, even if that doesn't go up, if you iron out your asymmetries and get your right leg jump and your left leg jump to be the same, that would be a definite improvement, even if nothing else improves. Good. So another question he asks is, how many days should people be working out a week for results? Do we subscribe to splitting up workouts into push-pull method or otherwise is his second question. I'll just say that the splits that I use an upper body, lower body split. I find that works for me for being in the weight room 4 days a week. So it's like, you know, Monday might be lower, Tuesday might be upper, Wednesday would be off, and then Thursday would be, what did I say, lower first, then Friday upper. And that's how I personally do my splits, and I think that works pretty well. How you're going to do that might be dependent on how many total days a week you can get into the weight room, what other training you're doing, things like that. Any thoughts on that?
So that was kind of 2 questions. How many days should we work out a week? So 2 minimum, 4 optimally.
In the weight room.
In the weight room, yeah, in the weight room. Like if you follow K-Star will tell you, you know, mobility is every day, and he's right. Like, we've got to be thinking if performance is a lot of who we are, and we have our eyes on the prize, and we've set goals that we're going to relentlessly pursue and devote all of ourselves to, then we've got to be thinking about it every day. And we're at least going to stretch out, do some kind of mobility. But weight room, yeah, 2, 4. He talks about what kind of split to use, and I think that depends on a lot of things. Like you and I, like we would use, we'd always go into an anatomical adaptation phase with a lot of teams. So, you know, that might be a 2-time-a-week workout, but it's full body. Like, if you're only training 2 times a week, then there's no reason to do a push day and a pull day. Like, get it in both days. Kind of that the split idea is more of an old school bodybuilding idea, but it's still relevant for stuff like 4 days a week. Like, I honestly, up to 3 days a week in the off season, I would say there's no reason to do much of a split, because as long as your recovery methods are fine, like you got to get some pushing in, you got to get some pulling in. Whether that is, on the first day I'm only doing, horizontal pushing, so I'm only doing maybe like some kind of dumbbell pressing, versus, the next day I'm doing a vertical press, I'm doing some kind of overhead press, and the same thing would go with pulling. I could do some kind of TRX row or a bent over row one day, and the other day it could be pull-ups. But
right, so even if you're not doing splits, like say you're doing a full body workout 3 times a week, you should definitely vary your exercises so you're not doing exactly the same thing at exactly the same angles. So I think that's an important thing to think about too, if you're not doing splits, so that you get kind of the recovery. You're not overusing anything by using it exactly the same way every time.
But I love the way it's thought in that, like, push-pull. Like, a lot of us, we just don't even realize that we need to push and we need to pull. We think, I got to bench press and I got to do push-ups and I got to press.
Only boys think that.
I guess I was guilty of it at some point. But we need to pull. And whether the ratio is 1-to-1 or whether it's more, I'm starting to favor more pulling than pushing. But that definitely a great point that we need to do both.
Yeah. The other thing you mentioned about how many days a week to work out. So we've been focusing on weight room. I think what you said about doing the mobility every day is key. Like, you can work out every day as long as you are recovering from your workouts, properly. Not every day should be a hard workout. Not every day should require 2 days of recovery. But I do think it's important. One thing I always say is that your body is meant to move every day. That's what it's meant to do. So don't be afraid to do that, but be smart and make sure you're recovering.
I think just one more thing to go on. Like, the push-pull idea is an upper body thing. An upper body is something that needs to be trained, but I think we need to think more into full body and lower body. So I think something that's relatively equivalent to push-pull is thinking hip-dominant, knee-dominant exercise. So squatting, split squatting, pistol squatting, one-leg squatting, all knee-dominant movements. Okay, deadlifting, single-leg RDLs, trap bar deadlift, all these things. These, glute bridges, like shoulder-elevated glute bridges, anything that kind of trains hip extension is a hip-dominant exercise, and that's the two things that I would stress on balancing more than upper body pushing and pulling. I think if you focus on the hip-dominant, knee-dominant, and then you get in the weight room, you do some pull-ups, and you do some presses, you're going to be just fine.
Right. And then, so the last part of his question is plyos, lifting, or a combination? What, do you want to take this one first?
Plyos, lifting, or a combination?
As far as, so he wants to improve his vertical, or...
Oh, okay. Yeah, definitely a combination. I mean, there's some good research to support complex training, which would be like doing a heavy set of squats and then going over and doing some split squats. We actually did that. We experimented with that with the track and field sprinters and jumpers about a year ago, and it worked really well. But I think maybe he's talking about like during the course of a workout, like doing a full plyo workout. And I think that's just silly. Like a full plyo workout, plyos, people injure themselves. If you're doing plyos correctly, then the volume needs to be very low. And the workouts that we're doing now, the plyo portion, 10 minutes, it's over, and then it's on to, agilities or lift. And but doing them, if he's going to lift 3 times a week, doing plyos, 10 minutes 3 times a week is much more advantageous than going and trying to do a whole plyo workout. And you're just going to fry your nervous system. I mean, it's such a nervous system dominant exercise, way of exercising. With that, we've got these really fast contractions, and we're snapping back. And plyos are just one of those things that we need to be careful of. We need to do them. There's no reason to do plyos if they're not max effort, full explosiveness.
Yeah, I think that is one of the things that is difficult about deciding to do a full plyometric workout, and I have done and do that, but I'm very careful about making sure that my rest intervals are long enough, making sure that I'm getting max effort at the end of my workout as I am at the beginning. I think, whether you do dedicated plyo and agility workouts versus whether you do a combination workout, I think that's dependent on training age as well. And I think especially for players that are starting out or newer or just getting in the weight room, I think the combination style works really well. And I think that's a good way to do it. Like if you're in the weight room 3 times a week, splitting up your plyo workout, that will ensure that you're not getting too much volume. That will really ensure that each rep is focused, and that's really important because you got to maintain your form and you got to have each one be close to 100% intensity. And then as far as like maybe he was coming at this question from like more general, like what's going to improve your vertical lifting or plyos or a combination. I think we also want to think about the progression. So you have to have the strength first, and then you want to make sure you're strong enough before you really think about doing any super high intensity plyometrics. Make sure you get things in the right order. You got to get strength, and you got to translate that to power, and then you can start thinking about getting more into higher intensity plyometric stuff. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that comes down to just rate of force development. Not to get too scientific here, but once we develop the ability to produce force via lifting, via the strength training stuff, then we need to start thinking about how can we produce this force fast. So if we look at like a sprint in guys like Bolt that are on the ground for 0.07 of a second during like the max full speed sprinting, he's fast because he's putting a lot of force in the ground in those milliseconds. But he's so strong that he has the capacity to put a lot of force into the ground very fast. So another way to think about that is something like a drop off of say a 12-inch box, and you hit the ground and pop off.
And not only generating force, but being able to absorb that force is really important too. You really need the strength to be able to do that.
Right, and that's the eccentric strength, and that's why one of the best ways to attack plyos is to do a lot of sticking first. Like, we'll never teach an explosive plyo without first teaching how to absorb it. So whether that's a jump to box and stick in this bilateral position, or whether it's a jump to box single leg, or whether it's a hurdle hop, stick, 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 stick. Once you show me that you can stick for about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, then we'll get into the pop stuff.
Right. Okay, and then since this next question is kind of related, let's go jump down this one. So this question is from Rob. He plays for the Masters team Chesapeake, and many other people had similar questions to this one. It's just in general, what's the best way to use the off season to gain speed and explosiveness? Like, what should we focus on in the off season?
I think it's gotta. Well, again, like we say, it depends on the level of athlete, but I think that the focus should be on strength and technique. One, it should be on adapting, and once we've adapted...
maybe people might not be clear what you mean by that, by adapting.
Well, maybe some body weight exercise, maybe, adapt by doing some slow eccentric push-ups, some body weight split squats, some body weight rear leg elevated split squats.
Having your body adapt to the motions that you're going to be loading later.
Right, and then cleans, like doing like clean complexes. Like I might come out and I might do just with the barbell, I'm just going to work on, getting my hips through hinge and back, getting my hamstrings on tension, coming up, snapping through my shoulders, getting my elbows up, and I might hit 5 cleans, and I might say, okay, now I'm going to front squat for 5, now I'm going to press over my head for 5, now I'm going to push press for 5, and just really adapting. And once we get those patterns grooved, we can load them. And then the off season, I think that there's a distinct 2-3 month block that we're focusing on cleaning up those patterns, and once they're clean, loading them and getting strong in those patterns, and then building on the other question. Once those patterns are completely loaded and we've developed that strength, then let's express that strength fast.